Hi, this is James Valvis, and today I'm going to be featuring a new poet. Her name is Tobi Alfier. Originally, her name was Toby Cogswell, and she's an amazing poet, just absolutely terrific. And I'm sure that you're going to enjoy what I share here as far as her poetry goes, and I hope that you'll appreciate what I say about her work. I always worry about that, and if any errors slip in interpretation, you should know that those are my errors and not ever the author's. So let me read Toby's bio here that appears at the end of her book, Somewhere, Anywhere, doesn't matter where. It's a terrific title. Tobi Alfier is a multiple Pushcart nominated poet and multiple Best of the Net nominated poet whose poems have appeared in Chiron Review, Gargoyle, Hawaii Pacific Review, the Los Angeles Review, Spoon River Poetry Review, Town Creek Poetry, and a bunch of others. I'm just giving you a short, brief list of the poems that have been journals that have been placed. They've appeared in multiple print and online journals in the United States and abroad. Many are listed under acknowledgments. If you go back into your bio book, you can see some of these places. Somewhere, Anywhere, doesn't matter where, is her third book, published since she married poet Jeff Alfier, and the previous works were published under Toby Cogswell. She is also the co-editor of the San Pedro River Review with her husband. And so that is the bio that she gives, and it's pretty standard across all kinds of poets. They basically give the same kind of bio. It's standardized in a lot of ways. It doesn't begin to tell or explain the vast literary accomplishment of the author. She's a terrific writer. She's a very different kind of writer than I am. And I often describe myself as a kind of a home run hitter poet. I'm always swinging for the fences. Sometimes that's a good thing, and sometimes not a good thing. My wife yells at me sometimes because my endings are way, way far out of field, and a softer tone would be better and an easier tone. But that's just kind of the writer that I am. I'm a home run hitter. That's what I strike out a lot. I hit a lot of home runs, or I try to hit a lot of home runs anyway. Sometimes here and there, I guess I do hit one. But there are different kinds of writers. There are much more writers who are contact hitters. Toby is that kind of writer. She's a contact hitter, and she'll hit a single, she'll hit a double, and every now and then she'll hit a home run. But she sprays the ball around the yard, and she'll get you the RBI that you need, and sometimes that's all she's trying to do in a poem. And I greatly admire that kind of restraint because I don't have it. There is, in the bulk of the work over time, you see a great development of the career. Ichiro doesn't impress you from at bat to at bat. I don't know, I'm on a baseball kick here, but he doesn't impress you that much from at bat to at bat. He may occasionally, but from overall, when you see the scope of his career, you're absolutely blown away by it. One of the things we differ at, and I think it's because I spent most of my life moving around, most of my early life anyway, most of my early adulthood. So I had this kind of bookmarked where I have like these early years in New Jersey, and then I move around all over the place. I lived in various states. I was in the Army, so I kind of shuffled around there, and then I moved here with my wife, and I've lived here for 20 years. And so bookmarked, but I never really have felt very close to wherever I've lived, probably since I was a child in New Jersey. But Toby is different. Toby has you can sense a deep connection with where she is, with setting. It permeates all her work. Character is sometimes even diminished in relation to the setting itself. This is a good thing. It gives it a great depth of field in the literary work that she does. And that work is focused around many things, but I think it's focused around Route 66. And if you understand the history of Route 66, you know that Route 66 used to be a transcontinental road, and people would take it from the east to the west, and it was almost a Huck Finn type of road, a journey kind of road from east to west. Go west, young man. And there were all these kinds of benchmarks, and there was all this literature and this mythology that built around this road. And then sometime, I think it was in the 90s, or maybe it was in early 2000s, but I don't remember when, but somewhere around that time they kind of like cut it off, and it became just kind of like this old like museum road, and it doesn't go from coast to coast anymore. It doesn't have that kind of scope. And you see almost in this road a mirror of America itself. where it was this great expansionist road where it was moving and it was growing and it was developing and it was in all this mythology and it was such confidence and such hope in the future and moving further and going places and doing things. And then it became smaller. It became more contracted in its vision. And Tobi captures this in her poems. She captures this contraction, and here's the thing: I think it would take a woman to really catch this, to really understand this movement from this almost masculine kind of projection into the West to the domesticity and the civilization that comes from simply settling. And I don't mean settling in a sense where you're dealing with less, but you're partially that. But it's also the settling the land and that kind of thing. You see this in poem after poem. This kind of this feel of the contraction of the American life and the American scene and the American setting and the American vision as what was once this great passionate push toward greatness becomes ever more dwindled and even cynical at times. You don't see the cynicism in Tobi's work, but you do see the cynicism. I see the cynicism in American view of itself now, and it's not necessarily a positive thing. And to some degree, I find that there's a sadness in that. Sometimes when I read Tobi's poems, what I feel is you see something of a combination of Spoon River and the feminine. What I mean by this is that in Spoon River, there's a completion narrative in there. In other words, you have a sense of completion in the lives of Spoon River because they're all talking about lives that are finished, lives that are done, lives that are completed. But in Tobi, you have a life that is not completed. You have lives that in poems that just kind of break off. They're not settled. You're not coming to any kind of grand conclusion about the life. You're not coming to any kind of true full understanding of life. It is basically, it just kind of stops, and you're not given that punch. This is what it means to be me, because you're not always entirely sure how that is going to end. And when you look at later on in the poems that I read, you're going to see that. You're going to see some of that where it just fades off. And let me see. I'm going to try to read to you something of what I'm talking about. Here we have a poem called West of Nowhere on Route 66. Now notice the title. The title itself is important. West of Nowhere on Route 66. So we're dealing with what used to be you would head toward the west, towards something. You're heading toward the west, toward your future, toward it. Now you're at a west of nowhere. And Route 66 is taking you. But remember, it's a truncated Route 66. It's a smaller, diminished Route 66. And so we see this in the poetry, and it repeats in certain lines. Like we see first signs of spring through weathered cracks. Again, you're seeing these weathered cracks. It's almost like the weathered cracks of the American vision, the American dream. And it ends. We change the station and turn toward home. Our easy rollback over now shore roads. Now shore roads. Now remember when we were moving west, when we moved west, and we were building, we didn't have shore roads. It was all that had to be built, but now they are built. But instead of looking at this as something that is completely positive, and there are some positive elements to it, but instead of looking at just the positive element, there's also a sadness to that. There's a contraction to that. These shore roads are not building toward a greater thing, but are retracting. So, and like I said, I think that this absolutely had to have come from a female. That's why I say Tobi is a true feminine author. I often feel many times that when I'm reading feminist authors, that what I'm getting is kind of a retraction of the feminine in favor of the masculine. In other words, a feminist sees women in terms of power and struggle. This is not Tobi's art. She sees the feminine in the true feminine sense, which is that there is the true power comes in relinquishing power. I know that sounds like a contradiction, but it's really not. I mean, it's also the Christian vision of power. True power comes in the sense that you give up power, as in a mother gives up fighting against the child, fighting against the pain of the child. She must ride out the pain. She can't attack the pain. She can't overcome the pain. She must ride out the pain to give birth to the new and the child and the beautiful. This is a very feminine kind of way of attaining power. It's to retract from the from the rush for male dominant power, and to accept a greater degree of. If you use the word submission, people get angry, but there is a certain submission to it. There's a certain submission to the greater understanding, the greater truth. It's the same way as you would create a poem. A poem is not, you cannot really build a poem out of power as an attempt for power, and it's a certain kind of relinquishing power. A poem is not a power trip. A poem is a certain kind of compliance, a submission to the beautiful, a submission to the muse. Notice how the muse is always female. The muse is feminine. You have to relinquish the power to take in the inspiration, to qualify and to push forth a greater understanding. This is not a masculine thing where you attack the thing. That's much more prose, where you're attacking the idea and you're attacking with a poem. It's different. It's a much more subtle type of thing. Even for somebody like me who tries to be a home run hitter, there's still a certain relinquishing of power. The feminine must dominate to some degree in the art. Otherwise, it becomes, rather than bringing people forth toward the art, you push them away, you repel them. And so Tobi, to my mind, is as strong a female author as you can come across, because she is not actively attacking her own feminine side, and she is achieving through her own feminine strength a true art that is unique to the female. A male cannot write a female's poem. He can't do it, and a female cannot write a male's poem. They are different. They are fundamentally different in the way that their minds work, in the way that they view the world, and in the way that they come forward into a poem. Now you can go to some degree to the other side, but you have to, at some point, there is a block that men cannot write female poems and females cannot write male poems. And when you try to do that, something becomes perverse. You find none of that in Tobi's work. Tobi is a completely the feminine is given full form, and it is absolutely beautiful. It is the way you want if you're a man and you have no chance to be female, then you love this, because it brings you into the female, and it brings you into that the way they take what is traditional male subject matter, and you see it through new eyes. When I read Tobi's work, I often think that there's it's what I call the wood in the words. And what do I mean by the wood in the words? I mean, first of all, it's solid. It's solid. There are a lot of times when I read, it doesn't matter what gender or what race or anything else. When I read their works, there's a thinness to it. It's like weak broth. The words themselves have no weight. They have no. It's not just that they don't focus on setting or something of that nature, or they don't bring in enough sensual detail. It's not just that. And it's partially that, but it's not just that. There's a certain heft that goes with certain people's writing. You feel it when you read it. There's and it's a rich, and it's dense, and it has that. You don't feel like it's balsa wood, like you can just tap it and it'll snap in two. What you have then in this wood of the words is this kind of beauty to it that's solid, but it's not too solid. It doesn't feel dull, like stone, like if you're looking at like concrete or something, where it's just the sameness and it's just rock hard, and you can't penetrate it, like some language poetry where it's just like this. You can't get in there. It's just nothing. If you take a picture of it, you're bored, because it's just rock. And if you on the other side, you have in something like marble, you would have like a sheen. It's just a falseness about it that is not quite there. But with wood, you have like wood grain. And now the thing about wood grain is it's kind of a pattern that is chaotic and yet makes sense. Do you hear what I'm saying? It's chaotic, but it makes sense. A knot is in there, but it doesn't seem out of place. The lines go jagged and go the way they want to go, but it doesn't seem to be wrong. If you look at a piece of wood furniture, a beautiful cherry table or something, or maybe a oak desk, and it's been varnished, and you look at that pattern, well, that pattern is not going to be like anything else in the world, but it has an integrity. The wood looks like wood, but it feels unique and individual. That's Tobi's work. It has that kind of wood in the word. And so when I come across these poems, they mesh together, and they have this kind of deep integrity about them. They feel like this particular person at this particular time is never false. She's a female. She writes in the feminine. She's of her time and place, and she writes of that time and place. She's of a certain kind of setting, and you feel the full impact of that setting. And sometimes it doesn't take a whole lot. Each one of her characters seems to come alive, and you don't get a big conclusion from it. You don't say, well, Ahab, which is this is a very masculine book, Moby Dick. Ahab comes to an end. His folly of seeking revenge against the white whale eventually leads to his destruction. It's a very masculine, finished kind of thing. Many times in Tobi's work, you don't find that. That's not what happens. What you see is it's an open question. It's an open question when a girl steps on a train to go see, her half-sister and to live someplace else. It's an open question what happens after that. She steps forward, but we don't know what she steps into. And so, as you're listening to these poems that I'm going to present to you, you should take all this into consideration. And I really do hope that you'll listen to these and fall in love with them like I have, and go out and buy her books and appreciate the great gift that Tobi has given us in this work. And she's a tremendous artist. I hope she believes this, because a lot of times, for some reason, women just have less confidence in their work. She should believe this, and you should believe it, because this is terrific stuff. Okay, I'm going to read some poems. I'll have some final thoughts, and God bless you. Okay then, this is the first poem. The man writes a note to remember shadows. He has a photographer's eye and a poet's words, a memory that stretches back years, remembering days, dates, the small humiliations of adolescence and successes of adulthood. But he writes himself a note to remember shadows that angle the sun off hills running from green to gray to white with snow, the undersides of obsidian slabs, frames around an absent sign that reflect onto walls of white, garage doors, curtains billowing, the magentas and golds of sunset as they play upon the ground, a train that doubles itself in reflection as it banks a corner in the middle of nowhere. He may forget the note. He will never forget to look for shadow. Here is the second poem. Matilda meets her half-sister. Her father slunk out the back door years ago. Her mother never said a word about it, just popped into the slits, changed the channel. Her mother, bribed into bitterness by silence, bowed under the weight of all her mistakes, some real, some imagined, some like the vapor of wind brushing through shadows. Matilda did all the daughterly things with Granddad, until he, too, drank himself into an early sleep. Now Matilda found herself on a train, slight suitcase between her feet, sweater the color of forgotten anger across her shoulders, traveling to meet her father's new family and her half-sister, almost the same age, with a prep school name, Paige or Sage, or who cares anyway. Matilda had been through too much, a sharp-worn heart beneath cornflower eyes. She didn't even notice the men around her who forgot they had wives. She talked to no one. A screeching stop, dark windows scattering light. On the platform a man stands, hands fidgeting like an old woman's on a rosary. A girl in pale summer yellow despite the winterness of the occasion. Matilda steps out into late copper dusk, the air smelling of wet stone. She takes a step forward. And here is the third poem. She was always in blue. She was always in blue in his dreams, late most every night and toward morning, as shadows tucked his room back into nightfall. She was always in blue, while out in the streets the slow downshift of an ancient station wagon, as a mother ran the paper route, before dropping her kids off at school. She was always in blue, in his dreams. As the lowering moon returned the early hours to dark, and he rolled over for one more hour. They could be anywhere, together or apart. She'd unlimber a quiet smile as she gestured. Something would break deep within him, make a place to fill his heart with her breathing. She was always in blue. The color of sea there was no name for. His waking eyes flickered like startled sparrows, like rain, touching him everywhere at once. And so there you have it. Didn't I tell you they were terrific? Tobi is a fantastic artist, and I didn't choose her 3 best poems. I chose the 3 poems I thought best represented the range of her work and the topics of her work and the touchstones of her work. To get her best poems would be you'd probably have to read all of her poetry to find out which one of those would be your favorites. Like I said, there's such a consistency there. They're all very good. So these are just a small sample of this great artist, and you should go out there and you should try to find as much of it as possible, whether you can get it online for free or you can go and buy some stuff. Please buy some stuff. Support artists, support poets. We don't make a lot of money. We don't make any money, some of us. And we do it because we love it. We do it because the art is worth dedicating our efforts to. And we do it because there's a great urgency in the particular art form that appeals to us. But it would be nice if more people supported more poets, and especially poets like Tobi, who are absolutely outstanding and deserve all the credit and laurels and adulation she can get. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this. I hope that you'll go forward and read more of Tobi and other poets and other poetry in general. And so thank you for listening. As always, please like, comment, subscribe to the channel. I'll be featuring more poets like this, as well as my own work, as well as commentary on important matters, and as well as other more entertaining things. And I hope that you'll join me in some of that. Thank you very much for listening. And as I like to end things, God bless you.